There we go. Okay, recording is on. Let's go ahead and start. So, like I said, morning everybody. Happy Monday. Today we're going to be talking about a changing economy. And what that basically means is, so we're in Unit 9, right? We covered Reagan, we covered the end of the Cold War. We're basically covering everything from 1980 all the way up to today. So there's only going to be a couple of lessons here. We're going to get into the economy throughout that period, though, and how it really changed and transformed the United States into basically what we see now. So we talk about the cause and effects of the economic and technological changes that occurred over time. Major exams this week. So that is a good question. We're going to get to that right now in a bit, like at the end. But yes, so you have 2 unit exams on Friday, one for physics, one for pre-cal, and you have a mock exam for my class. That's the AP mock exam. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Good question. All right, so let's start. So we talked about this already, right? Effects of economic and technological change over time. First key points. Economic productivity increased as improvements in digital communications enabled increased Americans' participation in worldwide economic opportunities. So basically, what you're going to see is an increase in productivity through this time period, in part because there's improvements in digital communication and overall technology. So basically production is going to increase dramatically, as well as Americans actually participating in a worldwide economy, as opposed to just, first there was local markets, right? Then there was national markets. Well, now there's worldwide markets. And the average person can participate in those worldwide markets. You don't have to be some major enterprise or major company, right? You can participate in them pretty easily with the internet. So I'll give you about a minute and a half on that key point, and then we'll move forward and get into what device, I should say, helped bring this along. About a minute left on the clock. A little less than 30 seconds. All right, let's go to move forward. So how about the computer? Yes, the computation machine and how it helped change the economy. So Americans, or America, I should say, was firmly settled on the economic demands of the digital revolution thanks to the computer. So because the digital revolution occurred and because Americans already had access to computers during that time, we were ready to go and to adapt with the changing times and technology. As you guys probably know, the computer was originally created in 1946, and you needed an entire room to put the computer in. It was a giant room. Those are all real pictures of computers, except for the one in color. That's the guy from Willy Wonka that tried to make a computer that helped him cheat. And the computer was like, no, I will not help you cheat. That would be against the rules and stuff. But it's still a room-sized computer, which is why I still like to throw it in there. Shows you how old that movie is, too. But basically, as time went on and innovations, specifically like the transistor and the microprocessor, decreased the size of the computer, will get them more available to more and more people, right? At first, you have to be a government. Later on, you got to be a rich person, and eventually, Farmer Joe, because Farmer Joe's still farming, even though it's the 1980s and 90s, will be able to buy a personal computer that fits in his house. And then eventually, Farmer Joe will be able to buy an iPhone that's more powerful than any of those computers, and it'll fit in his pocket, right? And we'll get into all that in a bit. I'll give you about a minute on here, just the first computer. I want to point out just first computers started in 46. Used to be the size of a room, but thanks to processors and transistors, they decrease in size. These computation machines. War Games? You talking about the movie War Games? War Games is a really good example of old computers. Yep. Yeah. Would you like to play a game? That's a good movie. About 45 seconds. Every time I teach and we talk about movies, it makes me want to watch like all the movies. Yeah, Ferris Bueller, War Games with Ferris Bueller. It's another good movie, actually. Okay, so let's move forward. We were talking about War Games. Well, these are straight up probably some of the, like, these are the computers from War Games, right? This probably looks a little more like what you remember from the movie. In 1977, the computer was finally able to get to a size where Apple computers created the first home computer, right? That's the Apple II. I think the Apple I was also in 77, but Apple computers, right? IBM will follow in the mid 80s with the PC. And then by the 90s, PCs were everywhere, computers were everywhere, I should say, right? And in the late 90s came the internet. And then from the 2000s to today, right, technology has expanded, things like the iMac or iPhones, and the size just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Even PCs, right, they're smaller than they've ever been and more powerful than they've ever been, assuming that you're willing to spend that much on a PC. But basically what you need from this slide is just documenting, right, or noting down the evolving technology. Might want to put down IBM as PCs, right? The Macintosh from Apple, yep. And Apple were the first ones to make a personal computer. IBM is the first company that made a PC. The operating system PC comes from IBM. Windows just made it more usable, and they own it now, but, well, not own it, but they, Windows are the people that make the OS for it now. But the original PC was IBM. The original Mac was Apple computers. That's where Macintosh is. And then, like, I didn't put a picture of it in here. I actually probably should have instead of the modern iMac. But if you look up like the mid 2000s iMac, see if I can find it. Like, I don't know if any of you guys have seen these. I remember thinking these were like the coolest things. Did you guys ever see one of these? This right here. Does this look familiar to anybody, by the way, or am I showing my age when I point out this computer and how cool it was? These are like this. You know what? I might fix it actually, even just for the classes now. But like, what is that? It's a Mac. It's an iMac. So this, you guys probably recognize this one, right? This is an iMac that you imagine. But this was the iMac before that iMac. This was like when I was in, I think, middle school. Let's do a Zoom call on that thing. It would probably explode. These are like from 2000, like 2001, I think. These are really old iMacs. But I remember they had like the neon backings, and it was super cool, guys. Like cool people like me, like that didn't have money, wanted to have cool computers like this. There's only one way to find out. Yeah, we have to find an iMac G3, as it's called. And they say this, the article says it, but it's actually, if you read Steve Jobs' biography, biography, not auto, because he didn't write it. They talk about how when he comes back and he makes his computer, it saves Apple and it sets him up for making the iPhone. Reminds me of this. It does look like one of those old SpongeBob TVs, but yeah, so those are iMacs. But that computer probably shows better the change, right? From you have these old school 80s computers to that, then, now like our phones, our cell phones, you guys know this, are like, I'm not telling y'all things you don't know, are more powerful than any of those old computers, right? You can get those old iMacs that I thought were the coolest thing ever and string together like 50 of them, and they're not as strong as your iPhone. Hence the idea that if you tried to do a Zoom call on it, it'd probably explode. And hence it looking like a SpongeBob TV, right? I think we're good on time here. I'll just leave a quick 15, 20 seconds. If you need more time, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on. But these personal computers actually give people access to them. And once people have access to them, you guys probably know this, that's when the weird stuff happens, right? Once people had access to new things, that's when it starts to become what it is. All right. So let's talk about key point number 2. Technological innovations in computing, digital mobile technology, and the internet will transform daily life, increase access to information, and lead to new social behaviors and networks. This is a big one. So we'll get into this and break this down. I have some questions for you guys in a second. I'm about a minute and a half on that key points. Side note, I was really curious if I could get an iMac G3, and it's like $3,000 on eBay because it's old. It makes me really sad because even now I still can't afford one. Not that I would buy one, I would have nowhere to put it. Oh, look, here's one for 177. Hey, the resellers, right? Here's one for $200, but it's refurbished, so that means it's probably not as good, right? Maybe we can get in this. Okay, maybe I'm not out of the Apple G3 game yet. It was never meant to be, right? Maybe the school will buy me one. And if I do really good and like, hey, Mr. Gavasso, do you want a new laptop? It's like, no, I want this. I don't think that'll work. They also won't ever give me a new laptop. They'll let me use this one till it dies, which will probably be soon. Okay, so enough griping about that. Let's move forward. Yeah, so let's talk about changes. So one of the biggest changes that came with personal computers came the internet. So originally it is the internet, by the way. The internet was interconnected computer pages that were meant to be accessed by dialing into the network. This is basically dial-up internet, right? I'm sure you guys have heard the sound like your mom picked up the phone and your whole internet connection went out. You couldn't talk to cool people on the internet anymore. Like that was a thing. That's dial-up internet originally. And you guys probably do not know the struggles of dial-up internet, but they were real. Computers will change everything from the workplace to the economy. Email will replace handwritten letters. Everybody will forget how to spell because we reported it. Sorry, I forget. I forget sometimes. I apologize for waxing nostalgic about dial-up internet. Y'all had broadband, right? By the time y'all were using computers, I get it, broadband. But back in the day, dial-up internet. America Online, when the computer had to tell you, you have mail, because we were, we didn't realize that, seeing the number wasn't enough for us. We needed it to actually tell us. Pagers, yeah. But email replaces handwritten letters. Who can think of other ways that computers being everywhere changed the workplace or just the workplace, like the office space that you would inhabit? No more birds. What? I don't think I get that one. I mean, like messenger birds? Is that what you're referring to? Files kept on a computer, sure. Sending letters. Oh, yeah. Messenger birds for sure. No more of those. Yes, files being kept on a computer is really good, actually. Instead of having like a big filing cabinet, like the one I have in my room is empty, all my files are on my computer. Actually, they're all on my hard drive. Somebody thought that I had my charger labeled last time, and it's my hard drive. My whole life work is in that thing. But yeah, what else? What do you got, chat? What else you got? What else changes society? Like instead of having a big filing cabinet with all my assignments, right? I just have them all in this thing. You guys can probably see that. But saves paper, sure. Think about like the use of something like Microsoft Word. What did using Microsoft Word do for people in the workplace? Think of a way it maybe hurts people now. Torture them. Not literally torture them, but like what could it hurt people's in other skills that people probably had before that now they don't need to worry about? Nothing. So the thing that I think of, well, yeah, writing to an extent, they have to type essays, yep. But so one thing that I'll mention, and people point this out to me, and this is probably the only time I'll mention this because typically, you know me, I don't care about spelling. But spelling, because of spell check, no one spells anymore, right? They're used to just typing spell check or writing neat and clean lines and stuff. It's another thing. Right? Imagine if like the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence couldn't write in straight lines because they were used to typing everything. It'd be a big jumbled mess, right? So the workplace changes, and when the workplace changes, abbreviations are a big one. Yeah, but see, here's the thing: spelling doesn't matter. Don't let anyone tell you that. Spelling don't matter. AP don't care, neither do I. That's funny. But yes, another way that changed were things like file sharing, Napster. Napster single-handedly transformed the entire music industry. No longer could, so basically back before that, it was kind of like, they were kind of like in like movie stars or TV actors or anything like that, where when musicians released the album, that's where they made most of their money. And then when they went on tour, that's where they made extra money. But nowadays with streaming, with file sharing, it's actually the opposite, right? They release albums only so they can go out on tour and make money that way. It was a really interesting dynamic, and you guys were probably around to see some of it. You might have been too young for it, but like me, I remember like adamantly like when that changed, and you can see it happening, and like record labels went out of business, and musicians like were broke, and it was people were fighting tooth and nail to like not have their things. Like for example, if you guys like country music, Garth Brooks like still doesn't have albums on iTunes free to buy because he loses like a certain amount of money for every album sold, and he refuses to give it up because he's old school. Metallica, yeah, sued everybody, right? Like all of these musicians, Kid Rock's another one I think of, not that people like Kid Rock, but like a lot of musicians like were really fighting this stuff, and famous ones, right? Metallica sued everybody. Garth Brooks still doesn't have his music on iTunes, right? Like most of them have turned it around and been like, we get it now, like it's how it works. But during when this was happening, it was huge. It transformed an entire industry, just like that. And everybody to an extent did it or whatnot. Like I remember, like in my old car, you used to have old CDs, and you would have to label them with like, it was like the way you'd make a playlist on your phone, but it was CDs and it was all files downloaded like that. So it completely changed how people listen to music, and it completely changed how the music industry worked. I'll give you about a minute and change, just in case we need it. And again, if there's any questions, let me know. I think more than anything, this topic will date me and age me, because I'm like, AOL. All the time. The idea of like, hey, we're bringing a computer in now, figure it out. Like, yes, frustrating, incredibly frustrating. Imagine like if you had an iPhone and they made you switch to Android, boomers. Imagine having an iPhone and being made to switch to Android. But imagine like that happening every time that a new computer came in, right? Or imagine people, well, you see it now, guys. Like, so I think the best way I can describe it now is if you walk, like most of you guys probably haven't been to campus, but some of you have. And if you've come to campus on a regular day when we're teaching regularly, you'll notice that each teacher teaches a little differently, right? Some teachers are really into the digital stuff and they still want you to use computers at the, when you're sitting at your desk. Some teachers like me are a little more old school and like, no computers out, here's some paper, let's do this like we did pre-COVID, right? And that's just an example of like, some people are really cool with the changes like during COVID, like Google Classroom and stuff. And I like Google Classroom, but I'd be lying to you guys if I said that I wouldn't go all the way back to normal the second that we could, right? I would, because I prefer that. And that happened on every scale, right? From whether it was school to everything else. That might work. It'd probably have to be flat on the desk, but that could work. Typically, though, I have no computation machines, and typically I give guided notes when you're in person. But it just depends. Like, it's on a case by case. All right, let's move forward. This is a big one. This one will change a lot. And it's basically media and commerce changing. During this time period, especially news media will really, really, really struggle. They will have a hard time digitizing their styles and what they did. Amazon, places like that allow people to purchase goods remotely, having them delivered to their doors, bring brick and mortar stores out of business. Go back. So that's good to hear. And one thing I will say that's going to that's worrying me actually about AP is that you got to do the AP test on paper and all y'all's hands are not practiced enough for it. And the reason I say you got it is because I don't want y'all to have to do the digital one. It's going to be harder, I think. Funny joke. But anyways, brick and mortar stores going out of business. Bookstores are like not a thing anymore, right? They're very rare, and it's only the really, really big ones. Back in the day, you used to go to little bookstores, like hole in the walls to find, like I used to do it to find old history books and stuff like that. And social and digital media transform the landscapes in ways that we barely understand even now, right? People will debate now what it looks like because of social media and politics and all that stuff. But overall, as like an entire concept, the digital media and landscape really, really, really changed things, and not necessarily for the better. Yeah, but sorry, I was looking at something funny. Anyways, I cannot stress enough, what you basically see through this digitalization and through social media is traditional media like newspapers start to die. Now, why might that be an issue? Why might traditional newspapers and traditional journalism dying or not being profitable be bad? Old people. Believe it or not, yeah, and I'm technically an old person, so maybe you guys can tell me if you think I'm wrong. But who remembers the type of journalist that was around during Teddy Roosevelt's time that helped fix society? You guys remember the name for those journalists? That's the opposite of yellow journalism. No, not. It's another color. Muckraker, right? So if you remember the yellow, what does the yellow journalist do? Somebody remind me of that. So we got the two names, yellow and muckraker. A yellow journalist is fake news, right? Clickbait. What's a muckraker journalist? What do they do? And if you don't remember, it's okay. Just put don't remember. But like, I'm curious if we still remember this. They expose the truth, right? They reveal the truth. They break past the muck and they find the truth. In today's landscape, without things like newspapers, without having to worry about things like money, right? Because back in the day, a journalist made money and it was easy and it was safe, right? They didn't have to worry about, well, what if people don't like this, right? What if people don't like the truth? Because sometimes the truth sucks. They didn't have to worry about stuff like that, right? Muckrakers didn't care. They cared about showing you the truth. And if it upset everybody, it didn't matter. One, they still got paid, and two, they told the truth. Are there still journalists like that? Sure. But could they potentially be in danger? That's a question, right? And I wish I had the answer for you. I don't. I'd actually be really curious to hear what you guys think. It's in the exit ticket. We'll get to that later. But it could be, right? They could be in danger. It's probably not as easy to write for a newspaper in 2021 than it was to write for one in 1898, right? In fact, I can tell you right now, it wasn't. It was much easier to write for newspapers back then. So on top of just Cavazos losing weird bookstores that he can go into and find old crusty history books, or Amazon getting rid of local businesses or anything like that, right? Because Amazon's really convenient and I use it all the time. I'm not going to pretend I don't. And aside from just, hey, there's not 10 newspapers in every town anymore, there is the potential, right, for consequence to happen. And that's why I put at the end there, we don't really know how they work yet. We haven't seen it play out. It's still playing out right now. Every time a new app comes out, like the whole thing shifts, right? Like I remember when there was people that had like YouTube money and they were really rich. And then TikTok came out and now there's like TikTokionaires and like all this stuff, right? And Instagram millionaires. And like every time a new app comes out and it sticks, it transforms the landscape. It's still moving. It's evolving as we talk about it. It's probably changing right now. We don't even know it. But again, transforming economies, fun times. Yeah, whole careers through just YouTube, right? Or through just social media. That is a thing. That is a thing. Twitch streamers, right? Who would have ever thought Twitch streaming was a thing? I enjoy a good video game. I still play them every now and then, even today. And I that's one thing. Twitch is one thing I don't like. I don't watch Twitch. Like I can't. That doesn't amuse me the way it amuses other people. And I don't blame anybody. I like no judgment. I get it. But it's just like that's not for me. But that's the change. That's what it's saying. It's changing so fast that it's hard to keep up with sometimes, at least for me, because I'm old. All right, I'm going to move forward. If you need more time on the slide or you need me to go back, please let me know and I will. So increased productivity. Overall, as a whole, the digital revolution leads to increased productivity starting in 1995, which is an indicator for a healthy economy. Usually when productivity is really high, the economy is doing really well. But this increase in productivity has not led to a standard of living increase the way it would have any time period before this. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically, typically when production goes up, standard of living goes up. It happened in the Industrial Revolution. It happened during the Gilded Age or during the Progressive Era. Like it happens, right? But in 95, when production started going up, standard of living stayed the same. And that's a big, like, what? Red flag kind of concern. So I'll give you about a minute on here, a little less probably. It's a short one. And we'll talk about why. About 30 seconds left. Actually, that's been a minute. Let's move forward. If you need more time, please let me know. So, third key point, employment increased in service sectors and decreased in manufacturing, and union membership declined. Quick minute, a little less, probably about 30, 40 seconds. We don't need too much time on this. I want to give you guys extra time for the exit ticket so you can think about it. So, because it's modern, I want y'all to really get in there and like use some opinions. Even some outside information would be good. I'd be really curious to see what you guys think about that. About 10 seconds, and we'll move on. This is a short one. So let's talk about changing work environment. Typically, we attribute the lack of standard of living increase because of the nature of the work Americans do and did. So back in the day, when production was really high, everybody was making money and everybody made more money because the types of jobs Americans were working were either, right, you worked in a farm or you were working in manufacturing. Most Americans, right, Farmer Joe probably wouldn't have been Farmer Joe anymore. He'd have been factory worker Frank and so on and so forth. And manufacturing work has largely stopped in the United States. And deals like the General Agreement of Trade and Tariffs make it easier for corporations to outsource their manufacturing jobs to other countries that can do it for less. That's why most of the items that you have around you right now, wherever you're sitting, you still have manufactured goods, but they probably weren't manufactured in the United States. Your phones, the computer you're on, your pen or pencil, whatever you're using for notes. Certain things are, right? Specialty items probably are, but not always. So like a good example right here is like this water bottle. You probably can't see it. It's just like a Yeti water bottle, right? But it says here, designed in Texas, made in China, right? So most things you have sitting around you were made somewhere else. Why are they made somewhere else? They're designed here, like your iPhone says it too, right? Designed in California, made in China. Why are they making them in China? It's cheaper. It's much, much easier. Other countries charge less. If your iPhone was made in America, it costs like $70,000. And that's with the like horrible the horrible ways that they mine things like cobalt, right? Like if they didn't do that, it'd cost even more, right? But it doesn't because it's made somewhere that's cheap. And that's not to make you guys feel bad for having iPhones. That's just how the global economy is working, right? Because we're in a global economy, things change. And so manufacturing work stopped in the United States largely. It was a decline. And with the decline in manufacturing work came a decline in labor unions, by the way. In 1954, labor unions peaked, and now we have like 12% of people have a labor union. This was also because Reagan broke up the air traffic controllers union by firing everybody. They were like, you won't. He was like, watch me. And then he fired everybody. This is because he supported supply side economics. But again, right back to the main point here. For example, I know people who work in manufacturing and they make fairly good money, right? Like they make more money than say an employee at a regular store or like that somebody that works at a restaurant or like a server, right? Typically. And they didn't finish school and all that. And it's hard work, right? Like look at that welder guy. Like that guy's working hard. But their standard of living is fairly comparable to a lot of others because it's hard work, right? Think of like people who work in oil fields or truck drivers. Like they work hard. They work hours and hours and hours, and their jobs aren't the most secure. It's why I would never recommend them to people if you can avoid them because it's not a safe job, right? When you miss work there, you lose money. But they make decent money with, and they're able to keep a relatively good standard of living depending on how hard they work. And that's because it's a job in that type of sector, right? It's that manufacturing style job. But most Americans don't do jobs like that anymore. In fact, very few do. We'll talk about the type of jobs Americans do on the very next slide. So I want to give a quick 30, 40 seconds just so everybody wraps up what we covered, and then we'll move on. Okay. Let's go to move forward. So let's talk about the service sector. Most Americans work in the service sector. In fact, 71% of American jobs in 2020 or 2021 in modern times come from the service sector. This includes education, food service, medical care, legal care, etc. Me here teaching right now is service sector job, right? Service doesn't mean service industry. It doesn't mean McDonald's. It does mean, it includes McDonald's, right? But it means anything that is me providing a service. I'm providing a service by teaching history class, and IDEA pays me for it, right? Twitch streamers are even service sector jobs, right? Because they're providing a service by playing games and people watch and pay them. Therapists, consultants, YouTubers, every single thing, most things you think of are probably service sectors. Call centers, service sector. Does this make sense? Manufacturing is literally building things. And like we said earlier, you have manufactured stuff all around you. It's not like the world stopped manufacturing things. They're just mostly manufactured in China, in places like China. So most Americans now work in the service sector, which is part of why standard of living kind of plateaus. We don't benefit from the massive productivity increases because most jobs are outsourced. It's why Detroit's a dead city, because they used to make all the cars in Detroit. It was Motor City. It was one of the biggest cities in the 70s. And then once all those car making manufacturers left the United States and went into places like Mexico and, China, not China, but places outside of the US, essentially, that city died. That's why you can get houses there for like a couple $100, $1,000. I wouldn't do it, but you could. About 40 seconds left on the clock. All right, let's move forward. So last key point of the day, real wages stagnated for working and middle class people amid growing economic inequality. Whose fault is growing economic inequality, by the way? Actually, let me rephrase this. You cannot blame just one person for this growing economic inequality. But which president thought that creating a system that benefited one side would help everybody? Reagan. So again, I honestly think that if you showed Reagan the numbers I'm going to show you now, he'd rethink his policy. I really do. And I'm not a big, I'm not like a Reagan lover or anything like that, but I genuinely think that. I genuinely think he thought his plan would work and it blew up in his face. I genuinely think that. Now, I say that because most presidents, I say most because there's always some bad ones, don't actually want to do stuff like this, right? They don't actually want to like negatively impact the people. But let's talk about the income gap in the United States. All right, this is a big one. Let's move forward. So the wealth gap. There is an increasing wealth gap between the wealthy, middle, and low class. This cartoon perfectly illustrates. All right, we talked about this already. The top 1% of Americans have seen their income raised by 275%, while the middle class has seen their income, while the middle 60% of people have seen their income raised by about 40%. So the difference is from 275% for the 1% to 40% for the middle class. This is mainly due to the outsourcing of high-paying manufacturing jobs, right? And it's not just the factory worker, right? It's not just factory worker, Frank. I want you to think like the managers of those places, right? The supervisors, the people that have been there for years and their pay is really, really high. A lot of these old school manufacturing jobs are gone, and with them, the potential for high wages for people goes with them. Also, the tax cuts made by Reagan benefited the wealthy unequally, right? But he knew he was doing that. But again, he thought it would trickle down. And as we find out, it doesn't necessarily trickle down as well as he thought, right? So this is the wealth gap, and it's important to just kind of have it defined. But again, a big reason why is there's no manufacturing jobs here. There's no jobs that a lot of people can take and work in that would help, in a sense that, how should I put this? There's nothing wrong with working in the service industry. I work in the service industry. But for the average person who works in the service industry, their job, the amount of money they can make is hard capped, right? To put it in perspective, every year that I teach, like that I finish teaching, guys, like the state of Texas requires schools to pay me like a little bit more. Not a lot, but a little bit, right? Like if I made X amount of dollars, now I make X plus a couple $100, right, for the year. I say that to tell you that manufacturing jobs, like factory jobs, let's say post Teddy Roosevelt, right? Because during the Gilded Age, just isn't true. That's how those jobs work too. And it's different from, say, a job at at another place, at a store or at a restaurant that doesn't do that, because they can recycle their labor, right? So, for example, if you worked at a Ford manufacturing center in the 40s, and you worked there for like 50 years, you were making really, really good money, right? Or even 20 years, let's say, and you were making really good money, and you were running things, and you had a very good, high-paying manufacturing job. Your standard of living was very good, right? You could afford housing, you could afford all this stuff that was happening, right? That's what all the suburb stuff was. That starts to go away when the manufacturing jobs do. And when more people start working in the service industry, that standard of living, maybe it doesn't go down. In fact, it probably doesn't go down, but it stays the same. And it doesn't change. And it changes very, very small, if anything. So I'll give you about a minute on here and then we'll move forward. Whoa, sorry. We'll talk about the exit ticket here in a second. In fact, in about 20 seconds, we'll talk about it. If you need more time on the slide, please let me know. All right, let's move forward. So, exit ticket, Google Classroom, already posted. How did the advent of computers change the landscape in the United States? Give 3 examples. Don't just think the first computer, think the whole computer thing we talked about in the beginning. You can even bring in social media or things like file sharing, or just how did it change the landscape? And it says landscape. What's the biggest reason for the wealth gap in the United States? I want you to pick the biggest reason. So really think about it, pick it. How did work change for the average? How did the type of work the average American does change? So that's that change from manufacturing to service. I want you to explain that change. What did it change and how did it change? And that is your exit ticket for today, guys. So if there are no more questions, you are good to work on your exit ticket. I want to give you enough time